Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Kerr. I'm with the Maryland Department of the Environment, and this is the first of our series of webinars for Food Waste Prevention Week. And we'll be doing these webinars Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week from 11 to 12, and introduce each day different topics on trying to reduce food waste and some of the technologies that are out there to process food waste and create soil amendments and composts and try to create a more circular society. So today we have some speakers that you're really going to love. I'm going to turn it over to Sydney Daigle. She's going to be the moderator for today's webinar. So let me just introduce Sydney. Now, Sydney is the consultant for the Food and Agricultural Regional Member Policy Committee of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. Whoops. She provides capacity and organizational development support for the Food and Agricultural Regional Member Policy Committee. She's the owner and operator of Lagniapp. Is that right, Sydney? Lagniapp Partners?
Lagniapp, yeah.
Yeah. A consulting firm that provides research, technical assistance, and project management support to food systems and public health-focused nonprofits and coalitions. Sydney has over a decade of experience working on systems-level public health interventions and local food and farm advocacy. She has worked successfully with diverse audiences ranging from school cafeteria staff to policymakers to affect change at the institutional, municipal, county, and state levels. Sydney's past projects include developing an innovative multi-sectoral food as medicine program, launching a county-level food policy council, and leading healthy food, retail, and local land use planning-focused advocacy campaigns. 1 second here, sorry. Let me just admit some people. Okay.
I can take it from here, Tim.
Council of Governments is an independent nonprofit association that brings together leaders from 24 member jurisdictions to address major regional issues in the District of Columbia, Maryland, and in Virginia. In 2021, the Council of Governments created a new permanent committee, the FARM, or Food and Agricultural Regional Member Policy Committee, to bring together local elected officials and subject matter experts in food security and agriculture on a regular basis. So it's my pleasure to turn it over to Sydney, and hope everyone enjoys the information today. Sydney, go ahead.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks so much for the opportunity to share some of these great stories and work that's going on across the DMV today. So as Tim said, I'm Sydney Daigle. I'm here as the consultant for the Farm Policy Committee at COG. And just a little bit more background about the Farm Policy Committee. It is, as Tim said, the newest policy committee at COG, and it was launched in 2021, whenever COG recognized the severe spike, and unfortunately that's a sustained spike in food insecurity that we had across the region, and some of the negative impacts of the pandemic on local food and farm economy, and really the viability of many businesses across the food system. So there were major issues to be addressed, and the Farm Policy Committee is bringing together both elected officials and subject matter experts from across the food system, some of whom you will hear from today, to work on some of these significant issues. So many of our members are very deeply engaged on work to prevent food waste and recover edible food. You'll hear some really exciting stories from folks who are working in DC, kind of also with partners, I think, around DC, the state of Maryland and Montgomery County, and all of our partners, I will say, who you hear from today are working very collaboratively. So those stories they're sharing represent the work of many people and partners. But food waste prevention, I think, is so important to the Farm Policy Committee because it's related to so many of our goals. So Farm is seeking to improve food security, advance farm viability, and also address environmental sustainability. And food waste prevention is really, at the nexus of these issues. So good food that's lost is profit that is lost from our farmers, who really, frankly, can't afford it. And good food that's lost is also wholesome, nutritious food that's not ending up on the tables of families from across the region who are food insecure. And we know from the recent California Food Bank hunger report that about 1 in 3 of the families in our region are experiencing food insecurity. So it's really a significant issue that we haven't seen go away in the past couple of years, and I don't think we will, unfortunately, anytime soon. So we really can't afford to waste food in our region. So I'm excited to have the opportunity to introduce you guys, if you haven't met them, to a few of the excellent advocates, academics, and leaders in our region who are working on these issues. So we have Morgan Crull, who's the Senior Program Manager of Food Resources at Manna Food Center, Caroline Howe, who's the Food Policy Director from the DC Office of Planning, and Dr. Stephanie Lansing, who's a professor and the director of Bioenergy and the Biotechnology Lab at UMD College Park in the Department of Environmental Science and Technology. So you'll hear a bit from our panelists about how they started their work on food recovery and food waste prevention, some of the key points and the development of their work, and what impact they're currently having. And I've also asked them to share kind of what's cool, what's really making them excited lately about what they're doing. So what's really innovative about their work. Following their presentations, and everyone's going to talk about, their work for 7 minutes or so, we are going to hold questions until the end. They'll talk a little bit about some of the policies that are either in place currently in their jurisdictions that's making it easier for them to do what they do, or also some of the policy solutions that they'd like to see. And then we will open it up to the audience for you to ask questions to our most esteemed panelists. So with that, I will go ahead and kick it off and hand it over to Morgan Crull. So Morgan, for those who haven't met her yet, is the Senior Program Manager, as I said, for Food Resources at Manna Food Center. Manna is Montgomery County's largest food bank and food rescue administrator. And prior to coming to Manna, Morgan was involved in food recovery at Mission Food Program, a redistribution organization for the Maryland Food Bank in Carroll County in Maryland. And in addition to Manna's Farm and Food Bank program, Morgan also oversees Community Food Rescue, which is a food recovery initiative that connects what would otherwise be wasted food to food assistance providers throughout the county using volunteer drivers and channel match software. I will let her tell you a little bit more about Community Food Rescue and her excellent work and the incredible impact they've had in the county and region. So with that, I will turn it over to Morgan. Morgan, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Sydney. I really appreciate it.
I'll pull the presentation up.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I apologize if it's a little loud here. I'm at our warehouse, so you might hear some background noise during my presentation.
Does that work? Is it up there now?
Yes, I just don't think it's in present mode.
Oh, it's not. Okay, let me see here. Not in present mode. Usually I can do 2 things at once, but I'm on one computer this morning. So let me just pull this up here. Okay. All right. All right. I think I got it. Is that in present mode now?
Not yet, but
It is on my screen. That's weird. I should have practiced this here. Sorry about this. Thought it worked here. Okay. Okay, still not up there?
It's okay. We can keep it like this if that
Okay, sorry
works for
about that.
everyone.
It's in full screen on mine. I don't know why it's not in everybody else's.
Totally fine. So as Sydney mentioned, my name is Morgan Crull. I am the Senior Program Manager for Food Resources here at Manna Food Center. And in honor of Food Waste Prevention Week, I'm really excited to share with you all about Community Food Rescue, a program that we have here at Manna that connects numerous food donors across Montgomery County with numerous food assistance providers that are also in the county. Next slide, please. Well, this slide. Thank you. So many of you on this call may already be familiar with Manna's mission, which is to end hunger through food distribution, education, and advocacy. And as an organization, we serve over 50,000 people annually and provide approximately 4.6 million pounds of food. And of course, a portion of that food is recovered. Next slide.
Mhm.
So here's an overview of Manna's programming. As I mentioned already, our programs include both direct food distribution, and that is our programs like Food for Families, where we have choice markets, satellite distributions, and also school-based pantries. We also provide food for some school backpack programs, and then we do community engagement events and pop-up pantries where we provide produce out in the community. In addition to those programs, we also work to improve food insecurity in Montgomery County through other programs such as our SNAP enrollment, community food education. As Sydney mentioned, we also have a farm to food bank program. And then of course, the whole reason we're here today, we have our community food rescue program. Next slide, please. So unlike other much like other areas of the United States, in Montgomery County, the problems of wasted edible food and food insecurity coexist. According to the Montgomery County DEP waste audit from 2022 to 2023, an estimated 90,000 tons of food scraps are generated each year in Montgomery County. While we know that not all of that food is edible, we know that a portion of it is. And as all of you probably know on this call, wasted food also means wasted resources. So energy and water, and wasted food is also a big contributor to increased greenhouse gas emission. And then of course, sometimes with wasted food comes wasted packaging and all the resources that go into that packaging as well. Wasted food is frustrating because, as you probably know, it's present along the high rates of food insecurity that Sydney mentioned. And we also have on this slide that statistic from Capital Area Food Bank's 2023 hunger report, which stated that approximately 27% of Montgomery County residents experienced food insecurity at some point between 2022 and of May 2022 and April 2023. Next slide, please. So this is where programs like Manna's Community Food Rescue come in. It's no surprise or secret that food assistance organizations like Manna have been rescuing food for decades. And this includes grocery store pickups, farm gleaning, diversion of catered foods, and all of that food is put towards fighting hunger. And fighting hunger and reducing food waste simultaneously is a proven approach. So the goal of CFR is to bring together local organizations as a coordinated network, and that sort of became known as CFR. CFR grew out of an awareness in the community about the importance of having a sustainable food system. So when we talk about the origin story of CFR, there were a few notable milestones that helped with CFR's creation. So first, in February of 2012, there was the creation of the Montgomery County Food Council and the creation by the County Council of a food recovery working group. So on this slide, you'll find some links if you want to read more about both of those events. And then soon after the creation of the working group, the county released an RFP to design and operate a coordinated collaborative food recovery network for Montgomery County. Manna won that initial contract about 10 years ago to design and operate a food recovery network in Montgomery County. And so this is how CFR was born. So following the guidance of the original food recovery working group, which you can see a lovely picture of on the slide, Manna chose to license a software called ChowMatch to increase the efficiency of connecting food donors to recipient organizations by creating something we call food runs. And those food runs are completed by volunteers and staff as well. Next slide, please. So this slide provides an overview of the important elements that make community food rescue work. And I'm going to be explaining each one of those elements a little bit more in detail. Next slide. So those who are interested in joining the CFR network, whether as a donor, a recipient organization, or a volunteer, can access information on the Community Food Rescue websites by clicking one of the three buttons on this slide. Next slide, please. Once on the website, those network members can also access information about food safety, which is obviously extremely important when it comes to food recovery. Each respective web page for each type of member has a section with food safety guidelines that are appropriate for their respective role in the food recovery process. The CFR website also includes links to other food safety videos that others can view. And whenever we represent CFR at events out in the community, we also bring food safety brochures that are available in multiple languages. Next slide. When individuals, organizations, or businesses decide to join the CFR network, they are first asked to create a free account in ChowMatch, the software that we use to operate this program. Manna has had a subscription to licensed ChowMatch since 2015, and it's free to use for all licensed food businesses, nonprofit food assistance providers, and volunteer food runners. Our team, the CFR team, has a close relationship with the developer for the ChowMatch software, and we are able to make enhancements as needed to meet the needs of the food recovery community. And in addition to meeting the needs of CFR, ChowMatch is really cool because it's also used to facilitate pickups from our Farm to Food Bank program, which connects locally produced foods to food assistance providers across the county. And then also we were able to flex the ChowMatch software during COVID to do home deliveries of the food that we distribute directly to Manna's participants. Once members have joined ChowMatch, each member is vetted for their respective attributes. So we'll talk a little bit about that on these next couple slides. Next slide, please. So volunteers who join the CFR network must have a good driving record, and they are also required to watch a food safety video, then pass a 20-question food safety quiz in order to become active and do their first food pickup and delivery. Next slide. Donors are run through the Montgomery County License and Regulatory Services database when they join. And then once we see that they're in that database, approved donors can donate all categories of food. So that includes prepared, perishable grocery items, and shelf-stable grocery items as well. Next slide. And then the last category are recipients. So recipient organizations or food assistance providers are vetted by speaking to Manna staff, and then we are able to share the criteria to receive food through this program. So they provide things like their EIN number to ensure that they have nonprofit status, or they can tell us that they're a school. And recipients then are able to make a profile, which includes information on the types and quantities of food that they want and are able to receive. Next slide. So when a donor organization posts a new donation in the ChowMatch software, that donation is automatically matched with an organization who can accept that type and quantity of food. So most of the food is matched automatically. However, there are some exceptions. Sometimes Manna staff will manually match food for appropriate agencies. For example, when items are donated in bulk quantities that are appropriate for soup kitchens or congregate meal sites. One of the things I'm excited about, as Sydney mentioned, is a new feature that we have added to the ChowMatch software, which allows for bulk donations. So if an organization has an item that they'd like to donate in a quantity over 400 pounds, we're able to now post those large donations in ChowMatch, and then the recipient agencies can log on and claim a portion of that food. So it's really great, and it allows recipients the flexibility to get the types and quantities of food that they're looking for. Some examples of products that we have recently had donated in bulk include romaine lettuce, apples, bananas, cantaloupes, cucumbers, applesauce, juice, plantains, bread, and other items as well. Next slide. So once a match has been made in ChowMatch, volunteer food runners are able to select the specific runs that they would like to volunteer for. And then also, it's okay if an agency doesn't need a volunteer. We have it set up so that agencies are able to do their own pickups as well. Next slide. And so, as you may have picked up on, this program is certainly dependent on Manna staff who are able to not only assign manual donations, but troubleshoot situations as they arise, communicate with all of our wonderful network members, and then get out there and actively recruit new members. So we're always looking for new donor organizations and volunteers as well. So you can see the 6 employees most directly involved in CFR on this slide. Next slide, please. So now we're getting to the interesting stuff. CFR currently has 98 active donor sites. Oh, sorry, it's the light in this room. There we go. We have 98 active donor sites who have made donations to CFR in the past year. So on this slide, you can see the categories for current CFR donors, and the percentages next to those types of donors represent their contribution to our overall donations in the past rolling year. So it may not be surprising to many of us who are in this work, but grocery stores comprise the highest number of donors in the CFR network. And over the past rolling year, they've accounted for approximately 37.5% of the pounds of food donated into CFR. And then you can also see on this slide, well, we only have 4 other food assistance providers who donate to Community Food Rescue. So What Else, who's located in Rockville, has been the driver of a large quantity of donations from this category, thanks to an MOU that we've signed with them this past summer. And so far in the past year, they've contributed over 990,000 pounds of food, many of which were those bulk donations I spoke about earlier. So one of the awesome things about the CFR network is that it does really put food assistance providers in this position where they are able to be both a recipient of the food that's donated, and also they are able to be donors themselves if they have food that would otherwise go to waste. And next slide, please. So since CFR's program inception in 2012, CFR has facilitated the rescue and redistribution of approximately 9,421,500 pounds of food. So the cool thing is, using the Chow Match software, we're able to approximate this as an estimated 9,799 metric tons of CO2 not emitted. So I'm really honored to be a part of this program that has had such an amazing impact and will continue to do so for Montgomery County. And then, of course, we'll save questions for the end.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Such incredible impact, and it was fun to hear about kind of how it works behind the scenes. So next we will, and as Morgan reminded us, we'll hold questions till the end. I'm sure you guys have some for her. So feel free to drop them in the chat so you don't lose them. But next up we have Caroline Howe, who's the Food Policy Director in the DC Office of Planning. So she works with the DC Food Policy Council. Caroline facilitates the Food Policy Council and supports building a sustainable, healthy, and equitable food system in the district. Prior to this role, she worked across the district government at the intersection of sustainable food systems, social equity, and entrepreneurship. Caroline also brings more than a decade of international experience supporting community-based planning, food waste diversion, and sustainability innovation. Sorry, I got tongue-tied, including in India, Nicaragua, Senegal, and Spain. She holds a master's in city planning from MIT and is going to tell us about some very cool things that are taking place in DC today. So with that, I will hand it over to Caroline.
Thanks so much, Sydney, and thanks to everyone for being here today. Again, I'm going to be focusing my talk on some of the work that the district's doing to support restaurants in reducing the amount of food that they're producing, and then some of the ways that they're getting that food out to folks who need it. So if we can head to the next slide. As you already know, the food waste is a huge problem nationwide. Here in the district, we know that nearly 22% of non-residential refuse, so that's the waste coming out of our commercial buildings, is compostable material. And of that, 18% is food waste. So we knew we wanted to be tackling food waste and some of the other problems in the district. Next slide. So the district has passed great legislation, including issues of food waste, since 2013. So in Sustainable DC, which is the district's plan to make the district sustainable, livable, and healthiest city in the country, is one of those goals was to reduce food waste by 60% from 2012 levels to 2032. So then to actually put that more into action, the Safe Good Food Act of 2018 enabled liability protections for donors and made those while they existed with the Good Samaritan Act on a federal level. We wanted to make sure that that was explicit in the district and change some of the ways that our Department of Health and Public Works was working with restaurants to actually make sure that they could compost, that they could donate any food possible, and that health inspectors were really looking to encourage restaurants to be making donations. In 2020, the Zero Waste Omnibus Act passed in the district, and that required large businesses to conduct organic separation. And that went from our largest grocery stores and our largest institutions like universities all the way down to our restaurants. And then the Zero Waste DC plan, which has just been released, and I'll drop the link in the chat. You can visit zerowaste.dc.gov, includes some more specific plans, including our curbside composting pilot, which is ongoing right now, and many other programs. But within that, we really wanted to support our restaurants in being able to meet these new legislations. So if we can go to the next slide. When I was at the Department of Small and Local Business Development, we created the Food Waste Innovation Grants to be able to support restaurants, food manufacturers, shared kitchens, and commercial corridors to minimize the food waste going to landfill, maximize food getting consumed, and minimize rat populations. Rats are definitely a problem in the district, and we wanted to address rats at source. So we were really wanted to be tackling the food waste that was driving and feeding our rat population. So we were able to offer 10 to 25 grants a year, distributing up to $500,000 each year, going out to these businesses. We can go to the next slide. There were lots of different ways that these could be used. And some of our grantees use them in all of these different ways. So all of these are some of the ways that restaurants can be tackling them, but they really did need some financial investment to get started. We saw lots of folks invest in refrigeration and freezing infrastructure to reduce wastage. And we've been able to leverage the data we gathered from this grant program to actually be able to justify even more community, district, and philanthropic investment in cold storage in this region, which helps businesses and also helps reduce waste. Both equipment and staff training around waste reduction, including preparation and portioning to reduce waste. Once businesses started separating scraps to be composting, or actually packaging food to be able to donate, staff were much more conscious about how much food they were preparing that was not being served or sold. And so it really did change how staff and restaurant owners were thinking about preparation and portioning. Folks invested in food preservation tools like vacuum sealers, dehydrators, and freezers to be able to make the most of food. So dehydrating fruit to be able to use as garnishes for cocktails, things like that, that were on an individual level, small food, but really added up. On-site food production to maximize freshness. We had businesses that actually started their own gardens or producing their own mushrooms on site because of recognizing that transportation to actually get there was already having food show up in a way that wasn't maximizing freshness or the amount of time they were able to have it on site. We saw businesses invest in food transportation technology so that another business could upcycle or cross-utilize underutilized ingredients. So a dog food business that opened making fish skin-based dog treats full of omega-3s for those dogs, actually coming with fish skins and fish scraps from one of our big fish houses in the district. We also saw food donation programs that were able to both invest in the packaging. So a restaurant does actually have to pay for packaging, whether those are big containers or individual containers, to be able to donate. And we were able to cover some of those costs to get businesses to see all of the other benefits of donation. Also collective refrigeration. So in shared kitchens, if I'm a small empanada maker and I have 20 empanadas to donate, it may not justify a food rescue volunteer coming to my kitchen to pick up just those 20 empanadas. But if in a shared kitchen, shared refrigerators that were able to have my empanadas, your few catering meals that might be left, all stored safely, refrigerated or frozen together, allowed food rescue organizations to more efficiently pick up that food from small businesses. And then, of course, we invested in waste programs that composted food scraps and recycled, really encouraging recycling and other waste diversion so that food scraps actually could be most effectively composted. Next slide, please. So we were able to work with really great community partners to make sure we were also integrating and providing the necessary training. With AgriCity and Compost Cab, we provided free food waste assessments in multiple languages and compost credits, which were free food scrap collection for businesses, $2,000 in the first year. And then our second year, we moved to just a blanket 6 months of food scrap collection. That really meant that we were able to see businesses invest in that food scrap separation, see the benefits for their business, see how they were saving money in other ways to justify that investment long term. We did outreach in 6 languages, meaning that many more businesses were able to learn about opportunities to donate through food rescue, opportunities to sell with programs like Too Good To Go, where they're able to sell food at the end of the night at lower cost to minimize that food waste. Next slide, please. So we had grantees in all 8 wards of the district. Again, some of these grants were very small. One of our grantees just needed $650 for their dehydrator, for their on-site mushroom production, and they really did still see their food waste reduce. And so these grants, for other folks on the call thinking about this in a city or in a nonprofit, they really did make a huge difference. And they really covered all types of food businesses and all types of food waste diversion interventions. Next slide, please. So as an example, the Queen Vic, which is on H Street Northeast in the district, they were able to divert food scraps with compost cab. They created bilingual signage for staff instructions, and they developed a late night menu called the Dumpster, which was really everything that was left. They made incredible food from it. And Chef Ryan Gordon really was a real incredible advocate to just encourage other restaurants to say, just do it. We really encourage businesses to talk to each other about the solutions that worked. And that's one of the things that has allowed this to spread to more businesses year over year. Next slide, please. So over 2022 and 2023, we awarded 22 grants across the district, delivered 57 food waste assessments. 20 businesses have continued composting based on that initial food waste innovation grants compost credits, diverted 76,000 pounds of food waste and the equivalent of 95 tons of carbon dioxide. We've been able to help other cities across the country and in fact around the world implement similar food waste innovation grants and see the ways that it can really be helping businesses make the right choices. I may have one last slide here before I pass it over to our next presenter. In fact, that's it from me. I look forward to your questions at the end of these presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. I really appreciate you highlighting the diversity of food waste interventions that a city can put into place. It was so cool to hear about how businesses use those grants. I mean, that's really blown my mind. Everything from more delicious cocktails to better dog treats. So that's super neat. Okay, next up, we have Dr. Lansing. So Dr. Lansing is professor in the Department of Environmental Science and Technology at the University of Maryland, and she serves as the co-vice chair of the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council. She leads the Bioenergy and Bioprocessing Lab at the University of Maryland, focusing on strengthening the biocircular economy, anaerobic digestion, and reducing food waste. Her multidisciplinary team was recently awarded $5 million from the National Science Foundation Convergence Accelerator Program to further develop their NourishNet intervention, which includes developing a food freshness sensor, diverting surplus food from landfills, facilitating food insecure consumer participation in this space, and turning spoiled food into bioenergy. So with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Lansing, and I'm so excited to hear about what NourishNet and her team of academics and community partners is up to.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, and I'm really happy to be here. So again, as we heard from many, there's 13 million people in the US without access to fresh food. And that's really where we're focusing our efforts on is these fresh, healthy foods that people want, but they don't have access to, or they don't know where they are and how to access that healthy food. And as we said, the grocery stores are the largest donators. And so in the US, we have 63,000 grocery stores. But one of the things is, how do they know that it's fresh enough to donate? How do you know when something can be donated or when it should be thrown or hopefully composted or digested? And so trying to understand that space. And then finally, we're working a lot in, again, 33% of our food in the US is wasted. Producing 3% of the US's greenhouse gas emissions are just from food waste and landfills. So really trying to understand how to reduce the carbon input or the carbon impact, of our food waste. Next slide, please. So what we did, so again, this convergence, so this is the National Science Foundation, and they have a convergence accelerator, which is really geared to get things out of the lab into the marketplace. And so we had a phase 1 study where we basically talked to over 150 food insecure individuals in English and Spanish. We talked to 38 distributors, donors, urban farmers to really understand what were their needs. And finally, talk to our institutional partners to really hone in on what is needed in this space. Next, please. And again, what we did is looked at that food freshness access. Next. And so what we developed was a Food Loops app, which I'll talk about, which actually builds off ChowMatch. So I'm so glad that Morgan gave us such a great introduction to ChowMatch, and basically helping to build off that platform with the ChowMatch group to coordinate food access donations and data on a larger scale. Next. And for the grocery stores, we actually created a sensor. So this could be used in food banks and grocery stores. So instead of you trying to figure out if something is fresh or not, we developed a quantum nose, which can help verify the freshness of food before donation or that has been donated. Next. And for the greenhouse gases, actually providing real-time resiliency data to grocery stores, to institutions on their decision-making process. Next. And so what is this quantum nose sensor? So it's basically kind of the size of a phone. And what you can do is, instead of you saying, hey, you smell this, is this fresh? Should we serve this? It actually provides data based on the gas emissions profiles. And it actually uses, we call it quantum nose, because it uses quantum physics to actually detect the gases to see if there is bacteria on the food. It can actually look at that emissions profile and actually see, is this something that has contaminated or not? Is this something that is safe to serve or not? So this is something we developed here at the University of Maryland. Next. And the outputs from this is actually integrated into this Food Loops app. So one of the things that we discovered is the customer is really missing in this space. So if Arlene would like to know if there's apples at her food pantry, right now it's really difficult for her to know what is available. So actually we're taking the ChowMatch platform and adding in this customer interface, where she can look and see that there's 50 pounds of apples and how many oranges are available and broccoli, but there's no tomatoes. So she could actually send a wish list back through the software or she could actually get a mapping function. It could take her to another food pantry that would have those tomatoes that she might be wanting, so that she has more voice, and actually there's an interaction with the customers and the food pantry, and so that she can understand what's available and where it's located. Next. And then again, for the quantum nose, so from the grocery store, he'll be able to not only put, I have this many pounds, which is already a feature in ChowMatch, I have this many pounds of broccoli or tomatoes to donate, but it'll actually be given a freshness value. And so that'll help the food pantry decide, is this something we serve now? How many days could it go into cold storage? If it didn't go into cold storage, how much time do we have until spoilage? Which will help them make decisions on something like dehydration, for example, so that as much of the fresh food can be used before it goes to spoilage. Next. And then it actually creates this, this freshness value. So for those tomatoes, based on the sensor, we can actually say we approximate 5 days before this might be spoilage, and that'll help you make decisions on how you store it, how you deliver it, and whether maybe you take that or maybe somebody else within the ChowMatch software would be more likely to have that because they have more cold storage space. Next. And then the other thing that it'll provide is really with institutions. So another layer is allowing local governments. Here's former Mayor Hollingsworth from the city of Hyattsville to give her decisions on, this is in your zip code, this is how much has actually been diverted. This is how much actually went to fresh food. This is the healthy food that got to people in need. This is the amount that actually went to landfill. This is the amount that went to composting or could have gone to composting if this infrastructure was in place. And this is the greenhouse gases based on all of these decisions. So if you digested or composted or threw it away or diverted it, actually gives you values based on that, so that you can actually make infrastructure decisions based on what's happening in this food space. Next. So again, we just received this new grant. So we have 3 years to kind of create this end-to-end holistic solution. So again, Donors app exists, and we are building off of ChowMatch, which you heard about. So that's one of our partners. But what we're adding is this consumer app. We're adding this fresh food sensor that is going to be integrated, and this institutional console, which gives you that inventory data analytics. Next. And so we're working with a lot of people in the space, including people in business, people in extension, as well as the Linda Bean Foundation, the Prince George's Food Equity Council, CSC engineers, which do a lot of diversion from landfills in this space, as well as Chow Match and Well Said Media. So again, we're kind of building off of what's there and then trying to expand it based on what we heard from consumers and food insecure populations on what they'd like to see in the future. So with that, I'll say thank you. And I guess we're now time for questions. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. I'm so excited about Stephanie's project, which, full disclosure, I worked on briefly. I think it's so cool. And I hope that you guys kind of saw the journey that we took you on. So, we started with Morgan, who's working on very community, local-based solutions with stakeholders in Montgomery County. We talked to Caroline, who's working at, kind of the jurisdictional level, DC level, looking at how you resource folks to stop food waste at the source, so stop businesses from ever wasting that food in the first place. And then we heard from Dr. Lansing, who is figuring out how to fill the gaps in the system, right? So where are the holes? Where aren't people being engaged, and how can we engage them better so that the food that they get at the distribution sites is what they want, and so that we're able to divert more of that good food from businesses and whatnot to folks who need it before it gets to that point where it is going to spoil. We can get to the right people who are able to get it on people's tables as quickly as possible. So very neat work, of course, is going on across the DC metro region, I think, as you heard, and a lot of innovation is taking place. So I do just have one quick question for the panelists, and then we can go ahead and open it up to audience Q&A. And some of you already touched on this, but I wanted to know if there were any local or state policies that support your work that you kind of want to call out. So these can either be policies that are in place that really were instrumental in making you successful that other jurisdictions could think about copying, or it could be policies that you really think are needed to really deepen your impact as far as food waste prevention and recovery go. So I'll let whoever would like to jump in go ahead and do so. Or I can call on folks. Dr. Lansing, I know you've done a lot of work through the Maryland Food System Resilience.
Space, and so
yeah.
In terms of kind of the food policy, so the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council really looks at policy in this space and what is needed specifically for the state of Maryland in terms of preventing food waste, making sure that the food that we need to get to pantries gets to pantries. And then again, thinking about the Maryland food residual diversion law that we have is really looking at what do we need to actually provide the composting sites, provide the connections between those that want to donate to pantries or to animal feed, because now you have to divert. So the new law in Maryland basically says if you produce over a ton of food waste, and I want to make sure I get the things right, per week on average, that you actually have to you have to reduce the amount of waste that you produce. You have to, or you have to divert to a food pantry, to animal feed, to composting or anaerobic digestion. That is listed in the law. And so again, anything that gives any of the policies, the local policies, whether it's at the municipality level, at the county level, or at the state level, that provides incentives for these diversion programs for cold storage, for composting sites, for food composting in schools or at local urban farms. Any of the policies that actually help this infrastructure is really going to help in terms of that food policy space, for us to provide the necessary coordination as well as the necessary sites. So there is sometimes spoiled food, but we want to make sure that that goes to a place in which it can reduce the greenhouse gases rather than going to landfills.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lansing. It's really helpful. And Caroline and Morgan, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was going to add, I do think that the Safe Good Food Act, which we passed in 2018, one big part of it that was never funded was actually further incentivizing food donation through tax benefits. And there's lots of reasons for organizations to donate, but fundamentally the food businesses in the district are operating on really tight margins, and food that is being donated is food that's not being sold, that they are still purchasing and putting labor into making. So we really do want to think about the ways that we're really transforming the system as far upstream as possible, for those businesses, and then encouraging them to donate through ways that will make a meaningful difference on their ability to stay in the district and stay in operation. So that is something, both in thinking about the legislation that we pass and the funding that we put forward. The same with these food waste innovation grants. We operated them for 3 years and they were not funded to move forward. So it's one reason why we really look to advocating for other areas, and certainly that we internally are trying to make the case that this really did have a strong impact. So making sure that policy and the funding align. I also think while there's so much that we've heard today about what's happening on the district, in our neighboring counties, and then even at the state level for a larger state like Maryland, fundamentally, there's some things that are very hard to change at that local level, where we do need to be looking to our federal neighbors to be making some of this policy change on a larger level when it comes to things like date labeling, which was also included in our Save Good Food Act in the district. Our local businesses now don't have to use the same food labeling that at a national level are required, but fundamentally it's very confusing. What is a sell by, use by, best by date means different things. The dates are confusing to people and aren't to what Dr. Lansing's been working on, aren't indicative necessarily of the safety or unsafety of a food. A food can go bad before its sell-by date, and a food can be great after. And so really thinking about how we make that clearer for consumers and clearer for producers will be so important, but it's very hard to change at that local level. So making sure we're balancing, pushing as much local policy as we can, and continuing to hold our federal legislators responsible for making some of these shifts at a larger level.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for kind of highlighting the importance of like congressional accountability too on this issue. I really appreciate that. Morgan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with both Dr. Lansing and Caroline. And just to piggyback a little bit off of what Caroline was saying, we think that it's really important to educate consumers about food waste on an individual level. So, supporting better information around food labeling can really help with that. And then just local governments can help to support educational campaigns around how to reduce food waste at home.
Yeah, so true, Morgan. Yeah, you're not going to advocate if you don't know about the issue. So I appreciate that. Yes, and thank you, Caroline. Yes, about highlighting the impacts of not having statehood for the district. So appreciate you calling that. All right, so I think Tim, if it's okay with you, can we open it up to the audience, or is there anything that you would like to ask our panelists? Oh, you may be muted, Tim.
Sorry, I had it in the back of my mind. I'd have to unmute, and then I forgot. But a couple of presenters had mentioned the Bill Emerson law, and I was just wondering if you guys could explain what that is, just real quickly, for those of anybody who might not be familiar with that. Because at Maryland Department of the Environment, that's one of the big concerns we get when we try to promote food recycling.
Caroline, you go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, so the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act essentially protects donors of food who are donating in good faith. So if you are donating in good faith, that there is no reason for you to believe that the food might have spoiled, if you've taken those precautions around that food safety, that you are cannot be held liable, will not be held liable. A challenge in terms of, and another reason why the district chose to make a local legislation that essentially repeats the Good Samaritan Act and applies it locally, is that the Good Samaritan Act has never been tried. And so I think there's still some hesitancy from donors. But there really is this protection on the federal level for donors donating in good faith. Now, I really appreciate and think we need to continue to make sure that donors are doing everything within their power to make sure that they are keeping food safe and keeping food within those time and temperature constraints that we would for food going anywhere. But I think that is one of the big pieces of protection that really is offered from the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act.
And I will say that to add upon that, that was a great explanation of it. But I will say there are certain standards that are also followed when we do donations. So, for example, in Chow Match, when you receive a food, you take a temperature, you note the time when the food received at the donation place. It has to stay within a certain temperature, and so there's certain standards that we use in this food donation space to make sure that there is assurance that at least the transport part and the storage part was not didn't contribute to any spoilage. But again, it's all about matching and getting that time, getting it again more cold storage to making sure it's at the proper temperature, and then getting it to the place where it needs to be to get it out to the people that need it in a timely manner. It's all, and again, often these are volunteer run, so it's just a lot of effort that actually goes into making sure that the food is secure in this space.
All right. Yeah, that's one of the concerns that people often have when we try to promote food donations. So that is a federal law, so that's very helpful for people who might be concerned about that. I put a link to the Maryland Department of the Environment's food waste diversion webpage into the chat. I encourage anyone who's interested to check that out. It has a lot of information about the law, which was passed in 2021, and some resources for donating food, for composting or anaerobic digestion, has information on those. This webinar will be posted there as well. So you can, if you'd like to review this or watch it again, you can go onto the website and take a look at it there. There's also the Maryland's Food Waste for Schools report, and booklet is up there as well. So there's a lot of resources there to allow you to learn more about what MDE is doing as far as food waste is concerned, and what some of the organizations around the state that are working in this field are doing as well. So again, I encourage everybody to take a look at that. EPA has some great sites on food waste as well. If you just want to go to the EPA.gov site and type in food waste, you'll get a whole bunch of information on strategies and regulations and all kinds of good information on how food waste is really affecting the climate and how we have to deal with that. Food waste is landfills are one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gases in the country. And so one of the big components of landfills that contributes to that methane is food waste. So one of the big ways to fight climate change is to try to separate food waste and process it in a way that minimizes the release of any greenhouse gases to the environment. And things like composting, anaerobic digestion, donating, and source reduction are the things that are promoted in Maryland to try to do that. So, and also every year, Maryland publishes a report on solid waste and recycling. And that's a public report. You can go onto the MDE website and just type in waste reports, and you can take a look at all of the different recycling amounts for each county in the state, and any other data that you want to look at for any kind of food waste that's generated and solid waste and everything in that regard. So I encourage you, if you're interested, to go ahead and take a look at that. Well, I just want to thank Sydney for hosting this talk, and thank all our speakers. It was very interesting, and I'm always happy to hear from everybody and see what's going on in this field. And I want to thank anybody who tuned in and watched the webinar. Again, you can watch a recording up on our webpage. And I just encourage everyone to do everything they can to try to source, separate, and work on reducing the amount of food waste that goes to our landfills or incinerators, whatever the case may be. So I just want to thank everybody. And does anybody have any last words? Oh,
I just want to thank our awesome panelists today for their
yes.
presentations and their good work across the region. And we'll just encourage you to check out COG's Farm Policy Committee if you enjoy hearing from smart people like you did today and want to have similar conversations like this again. I posted a link in the chat. So thank you so much for the opportunity, Tim. And we're excited to kick off this week's webinar series.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again.
So much.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.